I wanna try and take in all the highs, embrace them for more than a moment's time. I want you, please don't move when I push you away. I know I contradict myself some days, but will you ride the lows with me?
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I am your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Our goal is to help discussions about mental health be a regular part of your daily life, no different than discussions about physical health. Mental illness can be a topic of discussion under the umbrella of mental health, along with so many other topics. This show is the original program on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. Our network of shows are played in over 180 countries and cover more topics under that umbrella than you can possibly imagine. We were talking about mental health long before it became cool and popular to talk about, and thank goodness it has become so popular. We have incredible guests, advocates, patients, experts, people. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy our intro music, a song named Lows, written by Aubrey Toon. You can find her music at www.aubreytoone.com.
That night when I started praying, I cried, will you ride the lows with me? Will you ride the lows with me? When I'm down, my vision gets blurry.
Hi, listeners. I'm so glad to be here. One of your favorite podcast guests, Christine Louis de Cannonville, sent me the person that's on, Elsa. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much for the invite. I'm honored to be asked. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. So tell our listeners, they know a little bit about you from the intro, but tell our listeners a little bit more about you.
Well, my name's Elsa, and I am a mother, first and foremost. I am a mama, and I have two young children, and I am, at the moment, currently trapped in a situation of post-separation abuse, which is just ongoing. So technically, I'm a domestic abuse victim, but in the transition period towards survivor.
Yeah, and I like that clarification. I whenever I hear someone that is so angry about being called a victim, I think, oh, they've got to really embrace the fact that, first of all, there's no shame in being victimized. Everyone has been victimized at some point in their life over something. And if you don't embrace that piece, you aren't going to get to the road of survivor.
I think that's really true, because I think part of your journey on the road from victim to survivor is accepting that it wasn't your fault, and
Right.
nothing that you are doing is causing this. This is as a result of somebody else inflicting it upon you. And I think part of the terminology is accepting, yes, I am a victim of abuse.
Yes.
And that's, it also helps really from a legal framework. We are trying to get victims heard. So we have to get the victims to say, yes, I am a victim. And that's a tough one for a lot of people, because quite a lot of the time they don't even know they're a victim of abuse. It's just the way it is.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've been through this myself. Certainly was raised in an environment with my biological father, who was absolutely a sociopath. It's hard. No, I'm not going to say harder, but it's hard when this is what your normal was, because then you accept all kinds of not lovely behaving people into your life.
Well, I think that's another big learning point as well when you're a victim, is not just looking at the situation you're in, but actually going backwards and saying, why did I choose this situation?
Exactly.
And that's been a huge thing for me, because I have children. So I'm now understanding that we have to represent to them what we want them to be, and they have to learn from their environment. And if they're learning not very nice behavior, then they're going to echo that going forward. So
Right.
part of being a victim and the learning process that takes you to the survivor and hopefully not back to a victim again, is understanding why you went wrong. Why did I choose this? Because that's what people say to me. Well, why did you choose this guy?
Right.
Well, it wasn't horrible at the start.
No,
You know?
they're never. They're usually
Simply,
quite charming.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's been quite a, you know, but that's a big thing to look at, is why did have I always been a victim? Because a lot of people will look back, and if their childhoods echoed all this sort of signs of abuse and needing, you know, living in a conditional environment of love, then you're going to just, that's how your normal is. You have to retrain yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And dealing with the public perception and scrutiny of things as well, the insensitive, and many people being insensitive that really aren't meaning to, but they just don't know what to say. And
I think
so,
it's difficult for people to support, because if you are in an environment that is you know, with a huge element of coercive control, your daily life is dominated by it, and even to the point you don't
absolutely.
realize it. And so you'll have friends on the outside saying, hey, I can see differences in you, hey, I can see you, you know, reducing to a shadow of your former self, why aren't you leaving? And then they get to a point where they get annoyed that you don't leave, because nobody can wrap their heads around why you can't. And that was a difficult one for me with the outside world, because you had friends that just almost got tired of me not leaving. It's almost that thing of, you know, if you're unhappy, do something about it. And you're like, but I
Right.
can't. I'm trapped. I
It's
can't get out.
it's such a journey, and it's so, I know this from, I don't know why I have so much experience with all of this. Whatever, that was what I chose, I guess, if you believe that you chose what you wanted to learn here. If we go into a spiritual area, if that's the way it is, then I don't know why I chose all this. But now I'm getting this other view of, well, I have a family member that got into a very abusive, psychologically abusive relationship, and I could not get them to hear me. And here I know all these things and have done a bazillion shows, and I'm watching this happen before my eyes, and I left because I was so traumatized.
Yeah.
And I was used in that dynamic to make the trauma bond even deeper between this person and my mother. And then I came back, and now we're at the, okay, now this person's getting out of my mom's life, and I'm like, what kind of a crazy, just seeing it from the other side of it and knowing, well, yeah, sometimes people are dealing with other stuff and they can't be there for you, and then you feel guilty that you weren't. Would it have been as bad if you had stayed? There's so many elements to it.
It's very difficult, because I've had some friends that have gone through a guilt almost at not saying something years ago, but it was always the thing I projected everything was fine.
Right.
And I think it's more of a, we could all hold guilt for an awful lot of things, but
Right.
rather than
Yeah.
hold it, just learn from it and say, well, what was it I feel I did wrong? What would I have done differently? And rather
Exactly.
than settle on that, just go, okay, so what am I going to do if I come up with it again? And it's difficult, because it is, when you're a victim in a very toxic environment, there's an air of that toxicity seeps into you, and
Oh
that
my gosh. I
inevitably
call it,
seeps out of you. So,
yeah, I call that
I'm
flea and
guilty of
tick
being
syndrome.
horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly true. You can't,
You
when
can't help
you're
it.
just,
You're going to
when
get
you're
fleas and ticks because
permeated with
you're
it.
around
Yep.
them. Yes, exactly.
And I think that's a really another part of the journey, is when you come out of it and you're not living in it every single day.
Right.
Everything just feels so different at some point. It's, it feels terrible for a while you unlearn all your reactions that you've been trained and honed to do for your lifetime. But when you start being able to react naturally from actually just who you are, and not as a result of the environmental constraints that possibly stop you from reacting how you want to,
Right.
that's a really big thing as well. And it just all takes time, and it's all a healing journey and a learning journey, and a let's not do that again journey, hopefully.
Right.
Please.
And it's interesting too. Like I know in the UK, coercive control is illegal. Well, it's not illegal here in the United States. And so you get a protective order because someone is behaving, in a dangerous manner, but an attorney is going, for that person is going to say things like, well, did they ever hit you? Did they
Mhm.
ever threaten you with and point a gun at you? And I'm like, I get it. I get that that's what a defense attorney is going to do. But on the other side of it is, my answer to some of those things is, well, yeah, they hit me psychologically every day.
Yeah. Yep. That's because we're living with coercive control. It's like having 100 paper cuts a day.
Oh, yeah,
No one is going to hurt, but if you get 100, that's kind of really sore. But I
absolutely.
think from a protection point of view, it does we have this societal and agency thing where it just does come down to the physical. And I think that's where it's difficult because the police can only and agencies can only protect you up to the level of what's happened or what has been threatened. So, I'm dealing with somebody that's clever and they're not going to write in an email,
Absolutely.
I'm coming round to your house now to inflict pain on you in a physical manner. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
But trying to get people to understand when you've lived with this sort of person, you know how they work and you know how far they might go. You can feel the hatred. So you know what they're capable of, even though it hasn't happened, nor has it been threatened. And that's the distinction that we need to make and the agencies need to make of, what is this person capable of? Look at the history, look at the overall picture. Is this person a nice person, and are we missing anything?
Right. What are patterns of behavior?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
have the neighbors ever had an issue with this person? Has their behavior
Mhm.
bled into other relationships? I mean, that's I know in
That's one of
going.
the arguments I have actually in this, because I'm in like family court, which is a really bizarre system to be in because it's
Oh my God.
very heavily weighted to the person with the money. And
Yes.
I keep banging on about this. If I ruled the world, this is how family court would work. I've got a few, believe me, I've got about 10 so far. But I think, if I ruled the world, number 6 was just do the fact finding hearing first. So we go in and the children get thrown into this melee of strangers and social workers and people that don't know them, and they're not trained in trauma, they're not trained in coercive control and how to talk to a child. The child can't rattle off incidences of coercive control, but they can tell you what life was like on a daily basis. And whereas my argument is, instead of waiting, God, like 18 months or something for a fact finding, why don't you do the fact finding first? Why don't you go to the friends and go to the school and go to the people that interact with the children all the time and talk to them? And let's just, get around this legal stuff, but then there wouldn't be a lot of people making a lot of money from it. So,
Exactly.
but then children wouldn't be dragged through the trauma of it. And that's what my big thing is all about, really seeing the effect of the whole separation, on a personal level, but also seeing how the agencies that should support, they do up to a point, but also seeing how society just goes, oh God, we don't know what to do because it's their private business. We can't really get involved.
Yes.
If we get involved, are we, and it's all that thing. And it's trying to educate people of, we don't want you to solve our problems. We recognize that nobody appears to be capable of that. But we want to educate people of how to best support us, and that's the
other people
thing. And
just not to treat you like you have cooties because you're in this kind, like, or people that are just so insensitive. And I don't know. I mean, I all of my friends are people like Christine, the people have been through so much stuff in their lives. And so we can say anything, but then I get around outside of my bubble out into the general public, and you know, I'm talking to someone and they're looking at me like I've got three heads when I say coercive
Yeah.
control, and they are saying, you know, their general conversation is, oh, well, you know, the reason why, I mean, look at this guy, he built a house and he didn't do it in the way that our religion says you should do it. Now he's getting divorced. And I look at someone like that and I'm like, is this really the concern of your
Yeah.
life? Like, really?
Yes.
Like, this is how
Mhm.
shallow you are? Do you swim in a saucer? I mean, it's just amazing to
That's
me.
a good one. I like that. That's really good. I've never heard that before. I'm so using that. Can I pinch that? That's amazing.
Absolutely. Take it.
But that's it, and that's where people who it's very difficult. I mean, there's a few levels that people, you know, I don't blame people for not being able to grasp it, because you know we're
Right.
stuck in family court, and nobody can. You don't, unless you know or know someone or have been through family court. You cannot comprehend how terrible it is. It's just ridiculous. And then you're trying to explain to somebody how, you know, a normal, I say normal, I hate using that phrase, but a person of typical
Right.
persuasion or whatever, just how would they do this to their children? So then you've got
Yeah.
that whole other level of, I, I don't know. I don't know, because I can't answer that. I can tell you what I feel led to this and how he is, but I can't explain it. Because to a normal, loving parent, you just protect your children and you're everything they need. But you know, and I get this whole generation things and how children were brought up, and we live in a very different world now.
True.
But intrinsically, we just need to recognize children are children, and we are their protectors, and we are their educators, and we are the people that write the narrative of how they'll go forward in life. So if we constantly tell them they're, you know, naughty or stupid or a pain, then they're going to believe it. Whereas if we
Yes.
fill them with unconditional love and belief and hope and kindness and display compassion that they learn from, then hopefully we'll send them out into the world to be better humans. And that's all I want to do, is just make sure my boys, we're just breaking the generational cycle,
Yeah.
recognizing it and breaking it, and going forward without the chain of it, hopefully.
How
And
how have you dealt with that that shift that occurs where at some point, if this person, and I'm not saying specific to you, but this is what happens in these kind of relationships, where at some point in the relationship, if that person said, go jump off that cliff right there, that you would automatically just go do that without even thinking, to being someone who sees now and you know, and has a the, oh, okay, wait a minute, got it, this
well,
is
I mean,
dangerous.
yeah, I had a couple of shifts for me. One was when my eldest, he reached about 8 or 9, and he has ADHD. Um, and I started recognizing some things in him that I felt were bordering on oppositional defiance disorder. And when I started looking up and researching that and applying the knowledge I learned about my what I could see in my child, and then looking at it in his father, I was like, "God, this is about the only thing that makes sense. Where you literally can't ask anybody to do anything, because they'll always either change it or say no, and it has to be on their terms." And
Right.
I'd seen that, so I started challenging the way we were dealing with him, to try and he's an incredibly intelligent child, and he needs to maintain an air of control. So just telling a child to go to the room for an hour, it wasn't working. You know, there was no no traditional, shall we say,
Right.
discipline techniques that were working. So I tried to change it, and part of the defiance thing is the inability to take responsibility for your own actions, and then apologize for them. So I put into place a really clear um, 4-step program of how, you know, when you've done something wrong, you need to recognize that you've done something wrong. And if you don't recognize it, we need to talk about that, because obviously the inability to recognize other emotions. So that was a big thing for me, because I was trying to create the environment so my little flower would bloom, and I recognized we needed to change the environment. So what he was learning from the other parent was exactly what he was then displaying, this defiance, this lack of responsibility, apologizing. So that changed it for me, and around not long before my husband and I had actually physically separated. And then about 6 months after I started looking at this ODD stuff, um, my eldest was getting tested for ADHD, and it came out that he was indeed on the spectrum for that. And I started looking at my own life and going, everything I get annoyed about him, apart from the defiance, but he's got all the other stuff from me. So an inability to organize. He is so easily distracted. He can't focus on anything. And at school, they always used to say to me, if she just applied herself, if she concentrated more.
Right.
And the reality was I couldn't. I used to go upstairs to revise my exams, and I'd arrange all my CDs into alphabetical order, because I couldn't revise. So I actually went and got tested myself, and turned out, hey, you've got ADHD as well. So I started taking meds, and that cleared out the fog in my brain for quite a long time, but it never really completely sorted it.
Right.
And now I understand that, the interlock between ADHD symptoms and symptoms of trauma
Yep.
is obviously massive. So now I'm like in the transition period where, victim to survivor, I'm out. Whilst I'm still in a level of trauma, the amount of trauma has decreased. So in line with that, my meds have decreased. And that's been a really big thing for me, going, okay. So I still have a brain issue, don't get me wrong. There's still definitely
Right.
fogginess from a
right.
neuro thing.
From the trauma
but
and everything.
But the change for me was saying, the trauma was huge. And I think we need to recognize the impact of that on, we have so many kids that are now getting medicated for ADHD without saying, we say, hey, what are your symptoms? We don't say, hey, what's your environment like?
Exactly.
Are you getting it? And I think this is going to be a huge shift towards really recognizing what trauma does to children, and
what it does to your
children
brain
and your body as well.
Oh
I think
my gosh, yeah.
the physical, the body holds it, doesn't it? We know that. And that's been, again, it's this just emerging, everything, all the I keep saying my entire life has unraveled, but all the dots now join up. And that's been huge for me. So finally, at the age of 47, hopefully I've learned enough to go forward and have a second chapter that is just completely different to the first one.
Right. What led you to search out people like Kristin and, to know, what was happening?
Well, I think I first heard the term narcissist when my eldest was about 5 or 6. And there was a problem with a teacher he had at the time. And out in the schoolyard, one of the mums said, she's just a complete narcissist about this teacher. And I have to confess, when you stand there going, I think I kind of know what that means. I know it's a certain way, but I think I need to go and look that up. And I did. And through that, I started researching what that brought to a person's life that was living with somebody like that. And it was like a penny drop in, a light bulb moment for me, because it made me make the connection between, I married one and I was brought up with one. But I was actually brought up with a female narcissist. So that's where it came. So when I was you get to the point where you get thrown into family court, so you're going, well, I don't quite understand how I'm in family court. What is this? So you start researching an awful lot, and that pops up with Tina Swithin from One Mum's Battle, and her thing was divorcing a narcissist, and then it just led to, I'm a big researcher. I've read an awful lot of papers and essays, and Emma Katz in England is just one of the absolute oracles on coercive control. And then I discovered Kristin, who is just an absolute master of not only knowledge about it, experience of it, but her ability to write about it to a
Yes.
level that I could actually print out her pages from her website and take it to people and say, this is the most accurate description of my life that I can give you without me having written it.
I
You
will
know, that
never,
you
I will,
just read
I
it.
know, I know, I will never forget. I was in Italy, um, and I had been through absolute hell with a covert narcissist, and I just didn't know, I just didn't know was someone I worked with. And
Mhm.
I go to Italy. It was a grief trip because we went there after my father died, and my stepfather died, and who was wonderful, not a narcissist. And I came across Christine, and I came across Andrea Schneider, who's a counselor. And I just
Mm.
remember reading it and going, it was like 11 at night in Italy. uh I was just, I had recorded myself saying nice things to myself on, and I laid it over like Buddhist chants. I was trying to do everything I could to like reprogram my brain, because of course this narcissist was in Italy with me, not really, but they were
Oh,
in my head,
yeah, yeah, that's it. They
you
exist
know.
every
And then
day.
I read it and I'm like, what is this? Oh my
Yeah.
god, the sea parted, the clouds, and it was like, ooh, yeah, it was just amazing. And then I devoured everything I could get my hands on.
I think that's it. Once you read one article of Christine's, because they're just so incredibly insightful. But like I say, I have found them so useful for educating other people, because you don't,
Yes.
it's almost helps because you don't always want to, it's not airing your dirty laundry, but people can't always take the onslaught of everything you have to tell them. So I find directing them to places where they can read about it takes it almost off maybe a step away from the personal level. So maybe it allows them to understand the psychology of it when they're not thinking about the individuals. So
More
that's where
often than,
Christine
yeah,
works, is brilliant.
yep. And more often than not, I have handed someone this information or emailed it to them or been on a show with someone, and then they come back to me. I'd say 7 times out of 10
Yeah.
people come back to me and go, I think that I had that kind of a, blah, 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 my uncle or my this or my old
Uh-huh.
boss or my da da da.
Yeah.
And the levels of devastation of it are different for everybody, but everybody who's been at the level of narcissistic abuse, it's not a, oh yeah, I had a teacher that acted like that. No, 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 it's a, oh no, 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 this relationship with this person brought me to my knees and I was
Yes.
suicidal. It's like that kind of level. So
Mhm.
there's knowing what it is at the periphery, and maybe I met a nasty person, and then there's, oh no, no, this person was, it infected me at my marrow.
Yeah. It's a toxicity. They bleed a
Yep.
toxicity, and you can't help but be permeated by it because you're
Yep.
living in it every single day.
They're in your
And
bloodstream. They're the
yeah,
first
you're
person you
breathing
think
it.
about when you wake up,
Yeah.
and they are the last person you think about when you go to sleep. Yep, I
Yeah.
remember.
And
Oh,
you go to sleep fearful and you wake up fearful. And I
yep.
think that was a light bulb for me. Only a couple of days ago, I actually thought, wow, because even now I'm a single parent, so you never truly really have a wholesome sleep unless there's somebody else
Right.
around. And if you have actually officially passed the baton to them and said, I am not on duty tonight. But I don't really have that. And I thought, wow, what is it going to be like one day where you just go to sleep and you're not,
Oh, I know.
scared because what's going to happen tomorrow? What's it going to
Yep.
be? And that's where I think there's a campaign in the UK at the moment to try and recognise people who've committed suicide as a result of domestic abuse, so it actually include them in the
Mm,
figures. And I think that's a point
so
I certainly
necessary.
reached, and that's where I learned the phrase of people get to the point they're so desperate, they don't really want to die though, they just want the life they're living to end. And when
Yes.
there's no other way out because you are so trapped in the cage and you can't escape, then that's it's awful when people get to the point that that's the only way out. And I think that's where we need to understand the psychological damage it does on a daily basis to children and adults alike, so that we can support them better. And I'm really glad that I've been lucky when I came into this. I have the internet and I have the
Right.
ability to read and educate myself. And I feel like I've almost been dropped in at this really pivotal time where coercive control is being discussed so widely.
Yes.
Thank you, Kanye, or Yay, whatever your name is.
Yes.
Whatever it's brilliant, but
And
at
Trump,
the same
there's
time,
another one. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that was
And
it when he
Putin.
was in power. I found so many people like banging their heads, and I was going, "What's my life?" My husband doesn't have as much money, and I'm not as tall as his wife, and hopefully a lot nicer. Um, you know, but that's exactly what it was when you're banging your head against the brick wall, going, "But you're lying, and I have evidence A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you're still saying no, you're making it up." I mean, it's like you
Uh-huh.
just stand there going, but, and then to fight isn't going to get you anywhere, so you just accept it because that's easier.
I just had an instance where, this person that I've been working with and that was in the family and on the way out, it's like I told you before we started talking, it's a trip to have been the person that's been in these kind of relationships. And then now I'm, you know, close to the closest you can be to someone who is getting out of this kind of relationship. But
Mm,
what I watched that was so interesting because I could see it a little bit further away. When you're in it and you're in the abuse, which I have been, you're just in it and you don't have much perspective because you're just in it and you're just trying to freaking survive. But
the distorted
watching,
perspective, isn't
yes.
it?
And watching this person who was told by multiple attorneys, we have a no contact order. You cannot contact this person, and they still come over and then watching them reinfect my
Hmm.
family member's brain, and me knowing that, and my family member knowing you can't go talk to them. I mean, this protection order is for you, but you can be accused of breaking it if you go against it too. And just the automatic, that jumping off a cliff thing. Oh, they've yelled for me. I have to go out and talk to them.
Hmm.
And me having to scoop them up and literally drag them away from the poison that this person is trying to further get into their head. And I'm like, wow, I'm seeing this from every angle now.
Well, that's the effect of the trauma bond, isn't it?
Yep.
And I try. I I really started understanding that. I might actually have been one of Christine's pieces of work where I was looking at the effect of the abuser on the sibling relationship.
Mm,
And what I found was that they would be played off against each other and they were treated differently. So as
yes.
a result of that, resentment grew between them
Yep.
because, well, likes you more, blah, blah, blah. And I found that since they now have, it's a very a fair ship that I run in my house, and the same rules
Hmm.
apply to everybody. So they're not fighting for attention or affection, but it is that trauma bond. And I liken it to a dog and its owner. A dog will
Yes.
always be happy to see its owner, even if it knows 10 minutes after that owner walks in the door, it's going to get a beating. It'll
Yes,
still be
exactly.
happy, and it'll only
Yeah.
get to a point where it cowers away when it's really, really, really at breaking point. But they'll always, like children and humans and adults, we will always cling on to the hope that the good side and the good stuff will actually outweigh the bad stuff. And that's
Yep.
the thing is you've got to taper it off, and it takes a while
Yeah,
before
because
you
it's a
say, no,
drug.
actually, yeah, it is. It's
Yeah,
completely.
the mind control, the mind screwing
Mhm.
is the drug. And it's interesting to know all that I know and to sit and tell someone that I love, okay, this response where you're worried about them and you're worried about this and that and the other, that is the trauma bond, and you're
Mhm.
addicted to their games, and your body is betraying you right now. Your adrenaline is flooding, your cortisol. I can see it in your
Mhm.
face because you're bonded. And knowing that, oh my God, like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, that was me.
Yeah.
So
I
I
think
know it. I feel it
when
and I
you're
see it.
watching somebody, I mean, you probably find you can see it with their body language. So if
Absolutely.
they
I can
start talking
see.
about their abuser,
Yep.
they kind of curl down. And I find if I'm talking about my kids, my body language is so open and happy
Hmm.
and expressive. And as soon as I go to the discussions of the other stuff, I curl up. I physically,
You curl up,
yeah,
and then there's also
yeah.
that you've been trained to be the normal one. And I know we hate that word, but that's what they're doing. They've trained you to be the good one so that they can't. What am I trying to say here? The abuser trains who they've latched onto to represent them in the best light possible to the public, because you have to
Hmm.
cover for all of their dirty
Hmm.
deeds. And so you have been trained in the most primo magical thinking possible. And so I can also see when I'm talking to someone, and I know that I did this myself, that magical spark that gets in their eye. Oh, but no, I kept having to say to my family member, stop giving their resume. Stop.
Yes.
They're abusing you,
Oh,
and yet you're telling a
yes.
judge, oh, but they did this, and oh, but they did that. I
Yeah.
said, do you know that you were trained to do that for that person?
Hmm.
They're not
Hmm.
giving you, they're not giving anybody your resume, believe me.
I think that's um I had a light bulb moment back in November. I attended a conference, and there was a senator presenting at it who'd been the victim of domestic abuse, and she'd had a struggle to leave her abuser. And her sister actually spoke, and she said it was very hard for me to watch because nobody would believe her, because
Right.
this guy was so well presented, was a successful businessman, and was on the board of charities or whatever. And it was that day, I remember the sister saying, you just have to remember all of these people have been groomed. And it was a
Yes.
real light bulb moment, because it doesn't matter how clever a person is or how much integrity they have. We all have the ability to fall for stuff that isn't
Yes.
true,
Yes.
and if we've been fed it for 5 years and it's been part of the smear campaign, then you're just going to believe it when I kind of sound a bit crazy. And
Yeah.
that's been the thing for me. It's like, this guy has groomed some incredibly intelligent people,
Yep.
um but thankfully not everybody at the
You
end of
know,
the day.
I'll give this example just for listeners that was so funny. This is how it can happen on the periphery, like friends that don't believe, or church members, or charity, people that,
Mm.
this person's charity they're a part of, whatever. I was at a medical office, and some guy came in, and he always sits too close to the women in the office, and
Mhm.
always gave me the creeps. And then one day he decided to, because I wouldn't like engage with him, because I could tell, oh, this is a jerk. Of course, he's treated like a
Yeah.
king everywhere, but I just stopped engaging with him. So he decided to up the ante. And he started talking about how pathetic the nurses are at the local veterans hospital, because these nurses are sending these veterans to prison, or calling the police on them when they get sexually harassed. And I'm not saying all veterans
uh,
do this. I'm just saying that this guy was like saying, well, these female nurses that, I mean, come on. And I went and I told someone at the medical center, a male doctor at the medical center, this is what's going on out here in the waiting room. This is not okay. It's all women out here. Everybody else sat quietly and just took it, which is fine. I get it. Like, I totally get that. I'm not complaining about that. It was that the doctor said, oh, he's such a nice guy. He doesn't talk like that to me.
mhm.
And I was
Oh,
like,
yes.
dude,
Oh,
what?
yeah.
There's the shallow swimmer, the saucer swimmer again,
Yeah.
like, what?
I think one of the favorite comments I had was from one of his family members that said, "I must tell you, all my friends think he's charming." And I said, "Well, they kind of sit next to him at a dinner for 2 hours. That's very different. You can't,
Yeah.
you can't, you
Now you
just,
know the real him because of
you
those
know,
2
it was,
hours. Uh-huh.
yeah." And that was like, and then I mean, I've had many things, but that sort of sense of, because my husband has quite a bit of money, and it was almost like, well, you've got enough money. Would you really give
Uh,
up your lifestyle? And I was like,
yeah.
yeah, to be safe. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
And I have. And that's been the very interesting thing for me, is that money is not my driver. My
Right.
children are. And that's the bartering tool almost. I have the children, he has the money. I'm not allowed the money unless he, and it's that thing
Yep.
where I'm like, you know what? I really, I don't, I'd like some of my money, what's rightfully mine, but they're not, parental duties and obligations are not transactional. Either be
Exactly.
a good parent or don't, and go
Exactly.
away, please. And that's the really hard thing, because you want your children to. It's very difficult when they are clinging on to hope that one day it might all be okay, but they are trauma bonded,
Yep.
and the younger one more so than the eldest one. And that's really hard to watch, because you want to explain to them the stuff that you've learned about how this works, but you can't, because they're children.
Exactly.
You can't say to them, well, actually, if you go back in your childhood and understand, you can't do that. You just have to
You
try
have
and
to wait it
explain to
out.
them. Yeah,
Yes.
and
I
and
have a
all the time.
32-year-old son, and I'll tell you what, right now, I kept his dad away from him for a long time, took care of him even when we weren't married because he's got all kinds of health problems. And then our son said, well, I'll take care of him now. And I was like, goodbye. Okay, you
Off
got it.
you go.
And now
Yeah.
he's like, oh my God, mom, he is I mean, we love this man, but he is horrible to live with. Talk about a narcissist, cannot change. And he's like, oh, now I know what and it took him until 32 years old to go, yeah, mom, now I get it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's been an interesting thing in our house, because the eldest one has been very perceptive to certain
Mm,
things. And when last year, when it was his dad's birthday, I always try and encourage them to have hope and encourage them to have contact, but they don't want it. So
right.
it was for his birthday last year, and I said, you want to send a card to your dad or get a present? And the eldest said, no, actually, I want to make him a book. And I thought, oh, right. I think, you prepare yourself. So what's the book going to be about? He said, well, on the front cover, it's going to say, The Big Book of Rules by, and his dad's name. I said, all right. What's going to be inside? He said, it's just going to be empty, because he doesn't follow any mom, does he? And I thought, oh my God,
That
that's
is so,
actually genius and
it
brilliant,
is.
and sums it up right down to a child's level. And I can't say yes, he is. Yes, because it's the truth, and that's what's represented to them by the actions. It's nothing. I'm not saying anything. I'm not alienating him from them, or them from him. It's his actions, and the children have got some excellent ways of summing it up. And
Oh, they do.
I thought that was an absolutely genius one.
You could tell him that I actually, for the one that kind of opened my eyes to all this, I actually gave him a book, a very thin book, and the title was A Thin Read of Emotional Absentia, and it had 5 blank pages in it.
Brilliant.
And you know what? He goes, "What is this?
Oh,
Is
that's
it like
brilliant.
for me to put my notes in?" And only had 5 pages, and I was like, "Oh my God, just go away."
Wasted. Sometimes the delicate art of humor and subtlety can be wasted on people, and they are not your people. Do not surround
Exactly.
yourself with those people, you see? And I think that's where I have a very dry sense of humor, which sometimes in California doesn't always go down terribly well. But it is interesting, because I know my people. I know the people
Yeah,
that I
me
can
too.
be my well, I think ridiculously funny self with, but I'm from England. We're sometimes a little bit. It's not so much PC. We're just more
A little
real
more
and
reserved.
blunt.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and
yeah.
that's But yeah, don't. Yeah, those people. I think that's the one thing I learned about was ego and ego strength. And I think that's
Yeah.
been the thing for me. That's where a person that just can't grasp
No.
any reason to change or need to change or has the ability to change and
No, and
recognize how they can
it's
learn.
yeah, it's very hard. I have to say I still struggle with that piece, and I know where it comes from. I just figured this out the other day because I was just getting so irritated with this couple that just they're so shallow and superficial and just seems like everything goes their way. And I'm just like, why on earth, just really irritated by it. And my friends are like, why do you care? These people are a blip in your life. They're not your people. Why does it bother you? And for me, it goes back to, you know, banging my head against a wall with my biological father because he just didn't want to get it. He was never going to get it. He was a sociopath and his way was the way. And so I spent my childhood endlessly frustrated and yet seeking his love and approval that he didn't have to give. And so that's where that continues to plague me at 52, is that wanting someone who doesn't get it to like get it or to get something, and they're just not gonna.
Yeah, I think you certainly take a very different view on things, and you start interpreting little signs you see in life, in in other environments, in whether it's people's relationships with their children or with each other or friendships. And I can say it's been a really cathartic way for me to recognize the wholesome friendships and people that were around me.
Right.
And when you're going through something like this, you do shut down quite a lot, and you transfer everything to just a minimal amount of people. So I would probably keep 3 people updated,
Right.
because it just got so huge and so much, and then you're having to explain so much, and then you get re-traumatized by it. And
Yep.
when you are hearing other people going through it, and that's a difficult one as well, where you kind of just want to step in and go, well, this is what I've learned from that. And some people really aren't ready to be educated, and that's fine. They haven't reached that
Right.
zone, and that's from a point of view of me having to it's okay to try and educate the world, Elsa, but you don't need to fix everybody's lives with your newfound knowledge.
Wisdom.
you
I
know
know.
you can't do that. And that's where it's been very it's really highlighted for me the relationships around me that work and why.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of friends and a lot of couples, and I don't say this badly. I'm not saying everybody is in messed up relationships, but it's very easy now to identify the absolutely solid,
Yeah.
respectful
100%.
partnerships. And I think that's been the difference. The people that are in partnerships that um, just enrich each other. They just no, it's not a whole completing each other. I never like to use that phrase,
Yes. And
but
being
it's that
around people who
niceness.
aren't. Yes. And being
Yeah,
around people who aren't in a partnership and don't operate from a place of when am I going to be in my next partnership? Like they're in a partnership with themselves.
yeah,
So for me, being around couples, fantastic. You're right. I noticed that too. Oh, that is a really bonded, that is a healthy, which they have their problems too, but if there are two healthy people that choose to be together, whatever. But also just these single people that I'm like, oh my god, not everything in their life is, oh, find me a date, or that's not where they operate from. And I go, oh, that is so healthy too, amazing.
well, I think we read so much now about in the motivational quotes of you can't love anybody else until you love
Yeah.
yourself. And that's
Yeah.
not true. You can love people, but
Yes.
you won't love from your from the old hippie thing. You've got to love from your soul. You've got to be able to
Yeah.
love and live as you. Otherwise you're just faking it. And if you're
Yep.
faking it, even before you step into a relationship, because you try and project something you're not, um, then do you have to then maintain that fakery for
Right.
the rest of that relationship? And I'm, again, going back to the Brit in California, people have always said, you're just so real. And I am. I don't fluff things up. I'm not false. I don't do, I'm not a high maintenance personal grooming person.
Right.
I'm just
Me
me.
neither.
Um, I can't sign up for that, because I would fail, because if I'm raising the bar of how I project myself on a daily basis up from just jeans and a hoodie, then I'd have to maintain it. So I'd rather just keep it real and go, no, this is me. I like comfort. I don't work in an office anymore. I used to, and I used to wear suits and boots and everything, but I don't now. I'm a mom, and I want to be comfortable. And if I need to scrub up, I will.
Thank
But it's
God
all
for
about, it's just,
a good thing for coronavirus has been, oh God, now I really don't have to wear makeup ever again. I don't have to
no,
do my hair in these ways, and I don't have to wear these high heels like I didn't have to before, but I had that pressure, that societal narcissism that says you have to do those things, especially in Western societies. And now I'm like, nope, I do
no.
not have to do any of that.
Yeah,
Nope.
and I think, we've all been, dragged through this awful pandemic, but the every cloud has a silver lining and all that. But
Yeah.
it's allowed an awful lot of people to really address what is their comfort zone in their own personal
Yes.
existence, and whether or not they want to live um with either toxic influences or, and my kids find it funny that the divorce rate went up when the coronavirus first started. And my little one said, "Why is that, mummy? Aren't people happy to be spending more time together?" I said, "Well, see, that's the problem,
Not
sweetheart.
really.
There's a lot of people that are married, but they couldn't exist 24 hours a day with each other."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, I thought you just always want to be with people." I'm like, "Oh, we're so
Mm.
Disney sugar coated, aren't we?" It's
I
no, no,
know.
not like that. But I think, a lot of people have found a strength from having time to just be, all frustration and all the horribleness of it. But, there is a positivity that's come out of it, that a lot of people have taken some time to reassess themselves and
Absolutely.
got better lives from it. Not my
Absolutely.
ex-husband, apparently. He just spent time being, sorry, shouldn't say that. Sorry. Right. He just spent
Oh,
time honing his skills. There you go.
yes, that's what I
I
mean, I'm
won't say in
watching
what.
that. I'm watching that happen with a family member, the breakup after coronavirus. And it's like, I'm ecstatic that this has happened. The whole family is ecstatic that this has happened. And I'm like, well, yeah, put some pressure on these people that are so superficial, and they crack, and they don't.
No.
If you're stressed and you're the one that's out there campaigning on their behalf all the time to make them seem like a non-sociopath, then you're stressed too because of what's going on in the world, so you can't quite be there as much as you were
Yeah,
before, and
and
they get very
I
upset about that.
well, I think as well though, I think one of the things I actually discussed with my solicitor was the um almost, the addiction to attention from the outside world, because that
Hmm.
feeds them.
Oh,
So if they're not
absolutely.
going out in the outside world and somebody else is stroking their ego, if you're not stroking their ego in the house, life's just got worse.
Oh
Because
yeah.
they're not being fed, so they're just getting grumpier and grumpier, and that's been, I think, that concept of they need a certain amount of adoration per day. And a person who is likes to dominate with their physical presence in a room
Hmm.
cannot get that kick or that high. It's an addiction for them. They
Yep.
can't get that high from a Zoom call, can they?
That's
It's
right.
just not the
That's right.
same. It's like looking at a screen. It's like the Muppet Show, isn't it, when they were all on it? It's just
Hmm.
not the same. And I think that definitely, I certainly saw, or I felt I saw the impact of that. It was almost, there just wasn't any of the I found when my ex would come back from, say, a conference, he was so
Hi.
ebullient. Yeah, because he's like, I was amazing. I gave a great speech. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then he'd come back and it'd be like, yeah, well, you just had him here. And that, not really outperforming on that at the moment.
Yeah. They're the vampire
So,
without Louis.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And it's like, it's obviously educated a lot of people, but it's done an awful lot of harm to victims who were trapped.
Yeah. Domestic violence rates went through the roof. Yeah.
I think we'll have a lot of, and I still think, we're underestimating the level of trauma in children just because people have been dying everywhere. This is, a whole load of kids now that have separation anxiety. And not surprising. Don't just address it and accept it. And let's accept now that we've got a whole generation of kids that are going to need therapy, regardless of what their parents did. But how their parents may have handled this. I don't like people talking about death rates and stuff like that in front of my children. They don't need to know that. So I've tried to protect them from that. But we have a lot of kids that will freak out when somebody sneezes. But at the same time, we have a lot of kids that will know how to read a pregnancy test. Well, that's great.
Right.
They're going to be like 2 lines. We've got it. It's positive. We know that. We did plenty of tests, but I think the impact of this last 2 years on our children is just something we're not yet educated for or prepared for.
Absolutely.
So,
The mental health crisis. Yeah. Elsa, this has been so fabulous. We could talk forever.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Tell my listeners where they can find out more about you.
Well, at the moment, I am just developing a little website. I've been working on it this morning, but I started on Instagram. So the Instagram page is The Mama That Said Enough. And I'm also on Twitter as Mama Bear, and that is Mama Said Enough. So, but the website, The Mama That Said Enough, will be up and running hopefully within the next week or so. And there should be some good links there for people that need support or just some guidance, or hopefully to make people smile occasionally.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you, Kristin, for introducing us, and listeners again. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
But will you ride the low, low, lows with me? Will you ride the low, low, lows with me?
One thing you can always count on at Mental Health News Radio Network and my show is that there will always be dogs around. Why? They are natural healers, excellent for your mental health. The original therapy dog Miles has something to say in just a moment. For now, please check out all of our amazing shows at mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com and all your favorite podcast apps. Until next time, I'm Kristin and Ailsa Walker, and thank you for listening.
And I can ride the low, low, lows with me. I can ride the low, low, lows with me. Till my vision clears up perfectly. I can ride the low, low, lows with me.
Good boy.